Concerning tax reform, Owen, I think one of the more immediate frustrations about it is when you mention tax reform to the citizens and to the voters, everybody immediately thinks that you're talking about raising taxes. And when we have tax reform, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to raise taxes across the board. There's been a lot of discussion about the inadequacy of Kentucky's tax code. I think it's candid and it's factual to say that our revenues, our tax revenues, have not been keeping pace with the growth of our economy. So we need perhaps to have a more elastic tax code where it does keep pace with the growth in our economy. We've had a lot of people testify. I bet this one in particular, Dr. Fox from down at the University of Tennessee several years ago, talked about Kentucky needs to move its tax code to be more consistent with the type of economy we have now, away from taxing our manufacturing base, away from taxing a knowledge-based economy, i.e. with the income tax, more to a consumption-based tax where we, again, tax less on production than we do on consumption, particularly given the growth in service sector industries such as healthcare and professionals and construction industry. But I think, my position on that is we definitely need to have a significant dialogue about tax reform in Kentucky. And what I would honestly like to see, Owen, is for the governor to impanel a blue ribbon commission on tax reform and bring in experts from every stakeholder group in Kentucky across the landscape. Have them do intense research about Kentucky's present tax code. What do we need to have an adequate source of revenues to fund the needs of Kentuckians to move our state forward? And it needs to have about 4 tenets, I think. We need to have a tax code that's competitive. We need to have a tax code that's adequate to meet our needs, to fund the needs of our citizens. We need to have a tax code that's simplistic, which probably our tax code now is not. It could be more simplistic. And above all, we need to have a tax code that's fair for citizens. I think we need to have one that perhaps widens and broadens the base so that we don't necessarily tax the same number of people more, but we broaden the base and expand those that are taxed. But this commission would hear testimony, would look at empirical information, would listen to the stakeholders, and then what would be different is I would like to see them come back and make recommendations on how to reform Kentucky's tax code, and then the legislature not reinvent the wheel and go into our own study, but vote that up or down. Take away the political aspects of it. Don't get it into the political arena where people start making decisions based upon what's best for political expediency as to what's best for Kentucky's voters and Kentucky's taxpayers. Take those recommendations from that commission and vote those recommendations up or down. I would really like to see that. But yes, we certainly need, I think, to embark upon tax reform. A lot of talk, again, we've got a 6% sales tax, but we don't tax groceries, we don't tax pharmaceuticals, which I don't think we should. But it's interesting, our Tennessee neighbors don't have an income tax, but they have a high sales tax of about 8 or 9% when you count the local add-on. And so when they come across the border, sometimes to even buy cigarettes, which could be cheaper in Kentucky, they buy their groceries here too because they don't have to pay the sales tax on them like they do in Tennessee. But we need a tax code that's competitive and fair, and I think at a minimum it's time to really dig down and drill down into our code and look at opportunities for expanding it, but do it along those tenets that I mentioned.
Given that, as you said, some people hear tax reform and what they hear from that is tax increase, do you think that there's the political will now, given the current state of the economy, to move forward on this, or is this something that will be pushed back?
I hope it'll get a serious look. Obviously, and for reasons you can appreciate, this wasn't the year to embrace it because of everybody having an election. Next year, I think, would be an opportune time to really look at it during the off year, although we have a governor's race next year, so I really don't know what the governor's attitude toward that is or would be. But we need to look at it and give serious consideration to it now. We've had a lot of discussion. I've heard a lot of my members and colleagues talk about the need to have tax reform, to look at it, to make it more elastic, to make it more in line with the type of economy that Kentucky has, and to make sure that we have the adequate resources to fund the priorities like education and human services and corrections. Because we're in the business of providing those things, and like any business, you have to have resources to fund those. So yes, I hope that we would seriously, in a bipartisan way, take a look at that issue next year.